The history of the Philippines will prove to be an interesting one today as we discuss it. Philippine history can easily be divided into four parts: pre-civilization, home civilization, Spanish, and post-Spanish. Because history can be so broad, it'll be difficult to cover everything, but this will at least be a starting point for the islands. So let's get right into this. Grab your barong Tagalogs and let's skip across the Pacific. The Philippines have been populated for at most 67,000 years, though there is evidence that they are only like this since the early half of the 2200s of BC. Anyway, archaeologists say that a Jade Age began as Taiwanese trade or maybe even settlement was brought to the archipelago in 2000 or 1500 BC and lasted for 2,000 years. Trade also brought the Sahuin culture from maybe 1000 BC to definitely around 200 AD, which spread from Southeast Asia to China and most of the Malay archipelago. This culture seems to have valued past ancestors, as they had urns to carry ashes, and they also had unique jewelry. After iron came to the southeast, iron appears on the islands in 500 BC, but this culture ends with the decline of the Chinese Han. After the fall of the Han Dynasty, Filipinos formed their own structured societies. They still continued to trade with the mainland, but they distanced themselves culturally from others. The first of these civilizations were called barangay. They acted as city-states, with rajas, or kings. Funnily enough, even though they could be very distant, barangays were often culturally tied. They prized jugs, a symbol of wealth, metals, salt, and like all stereotypical French, tobacco. The barangays didn't change until the 600s when the Chinese Tang wanted to expand their power. The civilizations were trade centers. This was the height of the home rule for a while, until Indonesian empires conquered the most powerful lands in the early 1500s. The Hispanic empires in their time were the dominant world powers and they put their noses into nearly everywhere, including the Philippines. After being discovered in 1521 by a certain Mr. Magellan, the Spanish conquest began in 1564 and unbelievably lasted until the 1800s. The Spanish, meanwhile, put many laws, taxes, and Christianity on the Filipinos. Many revolts against Spanish rule took place. The first was the one led by Lapu-Lapu on Mactan that killed Magellan. This sort of thing happened very often with European imperialism. The longest revolt was the Dagohoy Revolt from 1744 to 1829, led by Francisco Dagohoy. On Bohol, the rebellion was kicked off by, like many, a new law, specifically a Forced Labor Act. It's also worth noting that before a Jesuit priest refused to bury Francisco Dagohoy's brother. After the Spanish-American War of 1898, the Filipinos proved themselves in war with the U.S. This continued until 1902 thanks to Emilio Aguinaldo, but after, the U.S. and U.S. companies put only some political control, but a lot of plantations on the Philippines. Of course, Filipinos fought in World War I because frankly, everyone did. But Hitler Pictures produced the better World War II Electric Boogaloo. In the film, Japan took over the Philippines and put a government very independent of Japan, but not 100% independent. The U.S. retook the islands via isle hopping, thanks MacArthur. Post-World War decolonization struck in 1948, and for the Cold War, they were a great ally, lending bases. So as you can see, the Philippines has proven to have a wondrous history. They were a center of trade, an excellent friend to the West, a colonial subject to 3 empires, and most of all, too many islands. We just found a couple hundred more in 2016. Come on! Anyway, these islands have come from humble beginnings to, as of now, a fast-growing economy. So no matter what you are, the Philippines shows us that anything can happen.